I've been driving rigs for 20 years, and the interstate at night usually feels like home. But that Tuesday, I noticed the reflective road markers Warren and Oppos. T just glowing. They were disappearing behind me faster than my speedometer could explain. Then came the crunch. It wasn't an Oppos. T, the sound of metal hitting asphalt. It was the sound of my own name being thought by something that didn't and Oppos. T have a voice. And then, the darkness didn't and Oppos. T just surround me. It recognized me. I think that and Oppos. S the part that still keeps me awake. The realization that before I even hit the ground, something else was already waiting to take the wheel. You know, people think being a long-haul driver is about the scenery. But for me, it's always been about the rhythm, the vibration of the seat, the hum of the tires against the I-80. I'm a practical man. I like things I can touch, things I can fix with a wrench. That night, everything felt heavy. I remember stopping at a diner in Nebraska around 11 p.m. The coffee tasted like burnt rubber, and the waitress, I can't remember her face, just her name tag, Martha. She looked at me and said, and quote, "You look like you and Oppos." Re already halfway where you and Oppos. Re going, "Sugar?" And quote, "I didn't and Oppos." T think much of it then, but back in the cab, things started getting weird. The air felt thick, like I was driving through water. I checked my gauges. Everything was normal, 12.8 volts, oil pressure steady, but I kept seeing things in my peripheral vision. Shadows on the shoulder of the road that seemed to move faster than my truck. I rubbed my eyes, thinking it was just the quote, white line fever quote, setting in. Then, I looked at my CB radio. The power was off. Unplugged, actually, but I could hear static. And under that static, a sound like someone flipping through the pages of a book. Very fast. Flip, flip, flip. I reached out to touch the dial, and that's when the steering wheel just went loose in my hands. It felt like the column had snapped, but there was no sound, just a sudden, sickening lightness. I remember looking at my hands in the dim green glow of the dashboard, and for a split second, they didn't an Oppos. T looked like mine. They looked older, grayer. I told myself, and quote, "Ethan, you and Oppos. Re just tired. Just brake. Just slow down." End quote. But the floorboard was gone. My feet were pressing against nothing but cold, rushing air. I looked out the windshield, and the interstate wasn't an Oppos. T there anymore. It was just a black vein cutting through an even deeper darkness. And I knew, deep in my gut, I knew I wasn't an Oppos. T driving the truck anymore. Something else had taken the pedals. I remember the tilt. It wasn't a fast crash. Not like the movies. It was slow, heavy. The trailer started to slide, and I felt the gravity shift to my left, pulling my shoulder against the door. The sound was like 1,000 windows breaking at once, but it felt distant, like it was happening to someone else's truck. Then came the pressure. I felt the roof of the cab cave in. I felt the cold sting of the steering column pressing into my chest. And for a second, just a heartbeat, there was pain. A sharp, hot white flash that screamed through my ribs. But then, it just stopped. The pain didn't an Oppos. T fade. It was simply deleted. Like someone had flipped a switch and the electricity to my nerves was cut. I was sitting there, in the dark, and I realized I couldn't an Oppos. T feel my legs. I couldn't an Oppos. T feel my hands. In fact, I couldn't an Oppos. T feel the seat under me. I tried to breathe, but there was no air, no lungs. And that's when the fear really hit. Not the fear of dying, but the fear of being nothing. I was just a point of awareness floating in a crushed metal box. I remember thinking, and quote, "Ethan, you need to get out. You're going to burn." And quote, but I didn't and Oppos. T have A and Oppos, me and Oppos to move. The smell of diesel and hot oil was there, but it was getting fainter. Then, the silence became absolute. No crickets, no wind, no sirens, just the sound of my own thoughts, echoing in a room that didn't and Oppos. T have walls. I closed my eyes, or I thought I did, And when I opened them, the truck was gone. I wasn't in Apo's T in the cab anymore. I was about 20 feet above the interstate, looking down. I'm a practical guy, right? I've spent my life looking at blueprints and engine specs. So when I saw my truck, my beautiful Peterbilt, lying on its side like a dead animal, my first thought was about the insurance. SN and Apo's T. That's strange? I was dead or dying, and I was worried about the deductible. Then I saw him. He was pinned between the seat and the dash. His head was tilted at an angle that, well, a neck shouldn't an Apo's T go that way. I saw the flannel shirt I'd put on that morning, the coffee stain on the pocket. It was me, but it felt like looking at a suit of clothes I'd outgrown. There was no connection. No, end quote. Oh no, that an Apo's my body. End quote. It was just hardware, broken hardware. And then the lights started to change. The red and blue of the state trooper's car that pulled up, they weren't an Apo's T just colors. They were vibrations. Every time the light flashed, it felt like a wave of cold water passing through my chest. I watched the officer run to the cab. I watched him shine his flashlight inside. I wanted to tell him, end quote, hey, I and Apo's am up here. Don and Apo's T worry about the guy in the shirt. He's not using that body anymore. End quote. But as I tried to speak, I realized I didn't in Apo's T have a voice. I didn't in Apo's T have lungs to push air. I was just a witness. And the more I watched, the more the world below started to look thin, transparent, like a movie screen being pulled back. The interstate, the truck, the officer, they were losing their, end quote, realness, end quote. And that's when I felt the pull. It wasn't an Apo's T upward. It was inward, like I was being sucked through a straw into a place where the air didn't an Apo's T exist. I looked up one last time at the Nebraska stars, and then the stars went out. Every single one of them. The darkness, it wasn't an Apo's T, just the absence of light. It was heavy. It felt like velvet pressing against a skin I no longer had. I'm a practical man, and in my world, if you can't see, you turn on a flashlight. But here, there was no, end quote, on, end quote. I felt a surge of cold, raw fear. It was the kind of fear you feel when you're a child and you think there's something under the bed, but magnified a million times. Because in this place, I was the thing under the bed. I was alone. Then, I realized the silence was humming, a low, vibrating frequency that started to shape itself into a presence. I couldn't in Apo's T see a face. I couldn't in Apo's T see a body. But I felt an, end quote, attention, end quote, fixed on me. It was like being under a microscope. Every mistake I'd ever made, every time I'd been impatient on the road, every time I'd ignored a phone call from home, it was all laid bare. I tried to hide my thoughts, to pull them back into the corners of my mind. But a voice, not a sound, but a direct injection of knowing, echoed through me. End quote, Ethan, end quote. It didn't in Apo's T say my name. It vibrated my existence. And then came the realization that shattered me. Something knew me before speaking. This presence. It didn't in Apo's T need to ask who I was. It had been there for every mile I'd driven. It had been there for every breath. It was as if my whole life was just a file it had already read. I felt a profound sense of HITIC. I thought about the 1,000 USB drives I'd been worrying about. I thought about the stainless steel motorcycle cover I'd just bought for my Airblade. How small, how incredibly insignificant those things were now. I wanted to ask, end quote, is this it? Is this the end of the road? End quote. The presence didn't and Apo's T answer with words. Instead, it showed me a flicker of light, not a tunnel but a crack. A crack in the darkness that smelled like rain on hot asphalt. Home. But the light wasn't and Apo's T welcoming. It was demanding. It felt like it was saying, end quote, you aren't an Apo's T finished with the wait yet. End quote. And then, the darkness started to peel away, like old paint. The return wasn't a choice. It was a violent, crushing descent. Imagine being a cloud, and then suddenly being forced back into a suit made of lead and broken glass. That was my body. I remember the first thing I felt wasn't the light. It was the smell of fire extinguishers and the taste of copper in my mouth. I heard a voice, far away, saying, end quote, "We've got a pulse. Get the shears." End quote. The pain hit me like a physical wall. Every rib, every inch of skin felt like it was being scorched. I tried to scream, to tell them about the darkness, about the thing that, end quote, knew, end quote, me, but all that came out was a wet, rattling gasp. I spent 3 months in a hospital bed in Lincoln. My wife, she'd sit by the window, and I'd watch the sunlight hit the hospital curtains. People asked me what I saw. I told them I Don and Appos. Remember, I told them it was just blackness. Because how do you tell your wife, a woman you've loved for 20 years, that while you were, end quote, gone, end quote, you realize that all the things we build, the motorcycles, the bank accounts, the jobs, they're just shadows. I still drive, but not the big rigs. Not anymore. I do local deliveries now. I like being home before the sun goes down. Because every time I see the interstate at night, I feel that pull. I still Don and Appos. Understand why I was sent back. But I do know one thing. I'm not afraid of the dark anymore. Because I know that when the lights finally go out for good, someone is already there, holding the file on my life, waiting to say my name again. And this time, I'll be ready to listen.